the mountains of Peru, there's a temple made of stones, so perfectly fitted together that you can't slip a piece of paper between them. No mortar, no cement, just massive blocks of granite weighing up to 200 tons each, carved with such precision that modern engineers still can't figure out how it was done. But here's the thing that'll really mess with your head. When you touch these stones, they feel warm. Not just warm from the sun, but warm from the inside, like they're generating their own heat. This is Sacsayhuaman, and it's just one of dozens of ancient temples around the world that seem to possess abilities we can't explain with our current understanding of physics. These aren't just impressive buildings. These are structures that appear to manipulate energy, sound, light, and even consciousness itself in ways that challenge everything we think we know about the ancient world. I'm talking about temples that can focus electromagnetic radiation with laser-like precision, stone chambers that create acoustic effects so powerful they can alter your brain waves, ancient structures that seem to harness the Earth's natural energy and amplify it in ways that would make Tesla jealous. And the most unsettling part, we're only now beginning to understand what our ancestors were really building. What you're about to hear will change how you think about human history forever. Because these temples weren't just places of worship, they were machines, sophisticated technological devices disguised as religious monuments, and the implications of what they could do are staggering. Now, before we dive into this rabbit hole, let me ask you something. Have you ever stood in an ancient cathedral and felt that strange energy? That inexplicable sense that something powerful was happening in that space? Well, it turns out your instincts were right. These places were designed to do exactly that, and we're about to explore how. But I need to warn you about something first. What we're going to discuss challenges the mainstream archaeological narrative so completely that many academics refuse to even consider the evidence. They'll tell you these effects are coincidental, that ancient peoples were just lucky with their construction techniques. But when you see the same impossible precision, the same unexplained phenomena, the same technological sophistication showing up in temples across every continent, luck starts to look like a pretty weak explanation. So buckle up, because we're about to take a journey through some of the most mysterious and powerful structures ever built by human hands. And by the end of this series, you'll understand why these temples might hold the key to technologies we've forgotten how to use. Let's start with something that sounds like science fiction but is actually documented scientific fact. In 2018, researchers at ITMO University in Russia made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. They found that the Great Pyramid of Giza can focus electromagnetic energy inside its chambers and beneath its base. Not just a little bit of energy, but significant concentrations that could theoretically be harnessed and used. Think about that for a moment. A 4,500-year-old structure built from limestone and granite somehow functions as a massive electromagnetic resonator. The researchers used radio waves to test this, and what they found was mind-blowing. When electromagnetic waves of certain frequencies hit the pyramid, the structure doesn't just absorb them or reflect them, it concentrates them, focuses them, and amplifies them in specific locations. This isn't some New Age theory or wishful thinking. This is peer-reviewed science published in the Journal of Applied Physics. The pyramid literally acts like a giant antenna, designed to interact with electromagnetic fields in ways that we're only now beginning to understand. But here's where it gets really interesting. The frequencies that produce the strongest effects aren't random. They correspond to the natural resonant frequency of the Earth itself, something called the Schumann resonance. It's as if the pyramid was specifically designed to tap into and amplify the planet's own electromagnetic field. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's cool, but maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe the ancient Egyptians got lucky with their proportions. But then you look at other temples around the world, and the same patterns keep showing up, the same ratios, the same acoustic properties, the same electromagnetic effects. Take the temple complex at Angkor Wat in Cambodia. This massive structure covers over 400 acres and contains more stone than all the Egyptian pyramids combined. But it's not just big, it's precisely calibrated. The entire complex is laid out according to astronomical alignments that track the movements of celestial bodies with incredible accuracy. But, more importantly, The temple produces acoustic effects that seem almost supernatural. When you clap your hands at the base of the main tower, the echo that comes back doesn't sound like a normal echo. It sounds like the call of a quetzal bird, sacred to the ancient Khmer people. This isn't an accident. The stone steps were specifically designed with exact proportions to create this effect. Each step is slightly different in height and depth, creating an acoustic filter that transforms the sound of a hand clap into something completely different. But it gets weirder. Researchers have found that certain chambers within Angkor Wat produce infrasound when the wind blows through them. Infrasound is sound below the range of human hearing, but it can still affect us physically and psychologically. At certain frequencies, infrasound can cause feelings of unease, fear, or even euphoria. It can make you feel like you're in the presence of something divine or terrifying. Think about the implications here. The ancient Khmer builders created a structure that could literally alter the emotional and psychological state of anyone who entered it. They built a machine for manipulating human consciousness, and they disguised it as a temple. This pattern repeats all over the world. In Malta, there's an underground temple complex called the Hypogeum that's over 5,000 years old. The main chamber has acoustic properties so precise that a person speaking in a normal voice can be heard clearly throughout the entire complex. But here's the really strange part. The chamber resonates most strongly at exactly 110 Hz. Why is that significant? Because 110 Hz is a frequency that has profound effects on the human brain. When exposed to this frequency, brain scans show increased activity in areas associated with emotion, creativity, and spiritual experience. People report feeling euphoric, having out-of-body experiences, or sensing the presence of something beyond the physical world. Again, this isn't coincidence. The builders of the Hypogeum carved this chamber from solid limestone with such precision that it naturally resonates at exactly the frequency needed to alter human consciousness. They created a machine for inducing mystical experiences, and they did it 5,000 years ago using nothing but stone tools. But perhaps the most mysterious example comes from a place called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. This site is so old and so advanced that it's rewriting our understanding of human civilization. Built over 11,000 years ago, it predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the pyramids by 7,000 years. According to mainstream archaeology, the people who built Göbekli Tepe were supposed to be hunter-gatherers who hadn't even invented farming yet. But what they actually built is a complex of massive stone circles, each one containing pillars that weigh up to 16 tons. These pillars are covered in intricate carvings of animals and symbols that seem to tell a story. But the real mystery isn't what's carved on the stones, it's what the stones themselves can do. Recent studies have found that the pillars at Göbekli Tepe exhibit piezoelectric properties. This means they generate electrical charges when subjected to mechanical stress. When the wind blows across them, when people touch them, even when the Earth's tectonic plates shift slightly, these stones produce measurable electrical current. But it's not just any electrical current. The frequency and amplitude of the charges produced by these stones match patterns found in human brainwaves during states of deep meditation or mystical experience. It's as if the entire complex was designed to create a specific electromagnetic environment that would affect human consciousness in predictable ways. And here's the part that really challenges everything we think we know about ancient peoples. The builders of Göbekli Tepe somehow knew about piezoelectricity 11,000 years ago. They understood that certain types of stone could generate electrical charges under specific conditions. They used this knowledge to create a structure that could literally alter the brainwaves of anyone who spent time there. This is supposed to be impossible. According to mainstream history, electricity wasn't discovered until the 18th century. The idea that ancient peoples could have understood and manipulated electrical phenomena is considered ridiculous by most academics, but the evidence is right there, carved in stone and measurable with modern instruments. Now, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds too incredible to be true. Ancient peoples building electromagnetic machines, stone structures that can alter consciousness? It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. But remember, We're not dealing with theories or speculation here. We're dealing with measurable, repeatable scientific phenomena. The electromagnetic effects of the Great Pyramid have been confirmed by multiple independent research teams. The acoustic properties of Angkor Wat and the hypogeum have been studied extensively. The piezoelectric properties of Göbekli Tepe have been documented and peer-reviewed. This isn't fringe science. This is cutting-edge research being conducted by respected institutions around the world. But here's what really gets me. If these effects are real, if ancient peoples really did understand how to manipulate energy and consciousness using stone structures, then we have to ask ourselves, what else did they know? What other technologies did they possess that we've forgotten or dismissed as impossible? And more importantly, why were these temples built in the first place? What were our ancestors trying to achieve? Were they simply creating impressive monuments to their gods? Or were they building something far more sophisticated? Were they trying to communicate with something beyond our physical world? Or were they attempting to tap into sources of energy that we're only now beginning to understand? The answers to these questions might change everything we think we know about human history and our place in the universe. Because if ancient peoples could build machines capable of focusing electromagnetic energy and altering human consciousness, then maybe they weren't as primitive as we've been taught. Maybe they possessed knowledge and abilities that we've lost in our rush toward modern technology. But this is just the beginning. What we've discussed so far is only scratching the surface of what these ancient temples can do. In the next part of this series, we're going to explore structures that seem to defy the laws of physics entirely. We'll look at temples that appear to manipulate gravity, structures that can levitate objects, and ancient sites where the normal rules of reality seem to break down completely. We're going to examine the evidence for acoustic levitation at ancient sites, investigate reports of objects moving by themselves in certain temples, and explore the possibility that some of these structures might be tapping into forms of energy that modern science doesn't even recognize yet. And we're going to ask the big question: if these technologies were real, if ancient peoples really did possess abilities that we consider impossible, what happened to that knowledge? Why was it lost? And most importantly, could we rediscover it today? Because here's the thing that keeps me up at night. If these temples really are machines, if they really can focus energy and alter consciousness and maybe even manipulate the fundamental forces of nature, then we might be looking at the remnants of a civilization far more advanced than our own. A civilization that understood the universe in ways we're only beginning to glimpse. And if that's true, then everything we've been told about human history is wrong. But let's dig deeper into something that's going to blow your mind. Because while we've been looking at individual temples and their strange properties, there's a pattern emerging that's even more disturbing. These structures aren't scattered randomly across the globe. They're positioned with mathematical precision along what researchers are calling a global energy grid. Picture this. If you draw lines connecting the world's most mysterious ancient sites, you get a geometric pattern that covers the entire planet. The Great Pyramid sits at the intersection of multiple lines. Stonehenge is positioned at another crucial junction. Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu, Easter Island, the Nazca Lines, they all fall perfectly onto this grid. Now, mainstream archaeology will tell you this is just coincidence. They'll say ancient peoples couldn't have coordinated construction projects across thousands of miles of ocean. But the mathematical precision of these alignments suggests something else entirely. These sites were positioned deliberately as part of a coordinated global system. And here's where it gets really weird. The distances between these sites aren't random either. They follow specific ratios that show up repeatedly in nature. The golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, proportions found in everything from seashells to galaxies. It's like whoever built these temples understood the mathematical language of the universe itself. But what was this grid supposed to do? Well, if these temples really can focus and amplify electromagnetic energy, then connecting them in a geometric pattern would create something unprecedented. You'd have a planet-wide network of energy amplifiers, each one feeding into the others, creating a system capable of channeling and directing massive amounts of power. Think about it like this. If you've ever seen those old science fiction movies where aliens have a giant machine that can affect the entire planet, This is basically that, except it's real, and it's been sitting right under our noses for thousands of years. And there's evidence that this system might have been active recently. In 1908, there was an explosion in Tunguska, Siberia, that flattened 2,000 square kilometers of forest. The official explanation is that it was caused by a meteor or comet. But here's the problem. No crater was ever found. No fragments of extraterrestrial material, just a massive explosion that happened to occur directly above one of the grid points. Nikola Tesla was conducting wireless power transmission experiments at the exact same time as the Tunguska event. He claimed he could transmit energy anywhere on Earth using the planet's natural electromagnetic field. What if he accidentally tapped into this ancient grid system? What if the Tunguska explosion was the result of too much energy being channeled through a network that had been dormant for centuries? I know this sounds insane, but Tesla himself believed that ancient peoples possessed advanced knowledge of electricity and magnetism. He spent years studying the proportions of the Great Pyramid, convinced that it held secrets about wireless power transmission. He wasn't some crackpot mystic. He was one of the greatest scientific minds in history, and he believed that our ancestors knew things we've forgotten. But let's talk about something even more mind-bending. Because while we've been focusing on energy and electromagnetic effects, some of these temples seem to interact with something far more fundamental: the fabric of space and time itself. There's a temple in India called the Kailasa Temple at Ellora that defies every law of physics we know. This entire structure was carved from a single piece of rock, working from the top down. To create it, ancient builders had to remove 400,000 tons of stone. But here's the impossible part. There's no debris. None. 100,000 tons of rock just vanished without a trace. Now, you might think they hauled it away, but the logistics make that impossible. There's no evidence of roads capable of handling that volume of material. No quarries where it might have been dumped. No signs of the massive workforce that would have been needed to transport it. The rock simply disappeared. But it gets stranger. The temple contains chambers with acoustic properties that shouldn't exist. When you speak in certain rooms, your voice gets amplified in ways that violate the laws of acoustics. Sound waves somehow gain energy instead of losing it. Whispers become shouts. Silence becomes pregnant with vibrations that you can feel in your bones. Visitors report experiencing time distortion in these chambers. Minutes feel like hours. Hours pass like seconds. Some people claim to have visions of the past or future while standing in specific locations within the temple. Scientists have measured electromagnetic anomalies in these areas, but they can't explain what's causing them. And this isn't the only temple where time seems to behave strangely. At the temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza, there are chambers where clocks run differently. Digital watches slow down or speed up depending on where you're standing. Atomic clocks, which are supposed to be the most accurate timekeeping devices ever created, become unreliable in certain parts of the structure. The builders of this temple encoded astronomical information into its design with impossible precision. The pyramid has exactly 365 steps, matching the number of days in a year. But it also contains calculations for the length of the solar year that are more accurate than what we achieved with modern instruments until the 20th century. How did they know? How could ancient Mayan astronomers have calculated the solar year to within seconds of accuracy? Without telescopes, without computers, without any of the tools we consider essential for such measurements. Unless they had access to something we don't understand. Unless they could somehow observe time itself from a perspective we can't imagine. But here's what really terrifies me about these discoveries. If these temples really can manipulate time and space, if they really can focus energy and alter consciousness, then we're not just looking at advanced technology. We're looking at technology that's more advanced than anything we have today. Our most powerful particle accelerators require massive amounts of energy to achieve effects that these stone structures seem to produce naturally. Our most sophisticated meditation chambers can't reliably induce the states of consciousness that people experience spontaneously in these ancient sites. Our best efforts at wireless power transmission are crude compared to what these temples appear to have accomplished thousands of years ago. And that raises a question that keeps me awake at night. If ancient peoples really possessed this level of technological sophistication, what happened to them? Why did this knowledge disappear? Was it lost gradually over time, or was it deliberately suppressed? Because here's the thing, if these technologies were real, if they were widely known and used, they would have changed everything. Free energy would have made scarcity obsolete. Consciousness-altering chambers would have revolutionized human understanding of the mind. Time manipulation would have made space travel trivial. But none of that happened. Instead, we got thousands of years of technological stagnation, followed by a slow climb back toward understanding principles that our ancestors apparently mastered millennia ago. Some researchers believe there was a deliberate effort to suppress this knowledge. They point to the systematic destruction of ancient libraries, the persecution of anyone who claimed to possess advanced knowledge, the way certain technologies were branded as witchcraft or heresy. Others think the knowledge was lost in a global catastrophe that wiped out advanced civilizations and left only scattered remnants. The flood myths found in every culture, the stories of golden ages that ended in disaster, the legends of gods who departed, taking their wisdom with them. But maybe the most disturbing possibility is that the knowledge wasn't lost at all. Maybe it was hidden. Maybe there are people who still understand how these temples work, who still know how to activate them, who still possess the ability to manipulate energy and consciousness and time itself. And maybe they don't want the rest of us to know about it. Think about it. If you controlled technology that could provide unlimited energy, alter human consciousness, and manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, would you share it with everyone? Or would you guard it jealously, using it to maintain power and control over those who don't possess it? Because if these temples are real, if they really work, then whoever understands them holds the keys to godlike power. They could heal diseases, control weather, influence human behavior, even manipulate the flow of time itself. They would be the secret rulers of the world, hidden behind the facade of governments and corporations that most people think actually run things. And the evidence suggests that somebody does understand these technologies. There are reports of experiments being conducted at ancient sites, government agencies that study these locations but classify their findings, private organizations that seem to have access to information that should be available to everyone. The truth is, we might be living in a world where the most advanced technologies are hidden in plain sight, disguised as religious monuments that most people dismiss as primitive curiosities. While we struggle with energy crises and environmental destruction, the solutions might be sitting right there in these ancient temples, waiting for someone to remember how to use them. But even if that's true, even if these technologies are real and accessible, there's still the question of whether we should use them. Because power like this doesn't come without consequences. If these temples really can manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, then using them incorrectly could have catastrophic results. Maybe that's why the knowledge was hidden in the first place. Maybe our ancestors learned the hard way that some technologies are too dangerous to use freely. Maybe the catastrophes described in ancient texts weren't natural disasters, but the result of misusing these incredibly powerful systems. And maybe, just maybe, we're not ready for that kind of power yet. But there's something else we need to talk about, something that's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about ancient construction techniques. Because while we've been discussing the mysterious properties of these temples, we haven't really addressed the elephant in the room. How were they actually built? Take the stones at Sacsayhuaman that I mentioned earlier. These aren't just big rocks stacked on top of each other. Each stone is cut with such precision that the joints between them are tighter than anything we can achieve with modern machinery. We're talking about tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters across surfaces that span dozens of feet. But here's what really messes with your head. These stones aren't just precisely cut, they're cut in impossible shapes. Some of them have 12 angles, others have even more. Each face of each stone fits perfectly against multiple other stones, creating a three-dimensional puzzle so complex that our best computer modeling software struggles to replicate it. And remember, we're not talking about soft limestone here. These are blocks of andesite and granite, some of the hardest rocks on Earth. To cut them with this level of precision, you'd need diamond-tipped tools and computer-controlled machinery. The ancient Incas supposedly did it with bronze chisels and stone hammers. Does that sound remotely possible to you? Because it doesn't to me. But it gets worse. In Bolivia, there's a site called Pumapunku that makes Sacsayhuaman look simple by comparison. The stone blocks there are cut with such mathematical precision that they could only have been created with machine tools. Not just any machine tools, but tools more advanced than anything we use today. The surfaces are flat to within 0.02 of an inch. The angles are perfect to within fractions of a degree. The holes drilled through the stones are perfectly round and smooth, with no tool marks visible even under magnification. Some of these holes are drilled at angles that would be impossible to achieve with conventional drilling equipment. And here's the kicker. The stones at Pumapunku are made of andesite, which rates 5.5 to 6 on the Mohs hardness scale. That's harder than steel. To cut stone that hard with the precision we see at Pumapunku, you'd need tools made from materials that are even harder. Diamond-tipped saws, carbide drills, things that weren't invented until the 20th century. But according to mainstream archaeology, the people who built Pumapunku didn't even have iron tools. They worked with copper and bronze, metals that are softer than the stones they were supposedly cutting. It's like trying to carve ice with a stick of butter. The conventional explanation is that they used a technique called pecking, where you gradually chip away at the stone using harder rocks. But anyone who's actually tried this knows it's impossible to achieve the precision we see at these sites. Pecking creates rough, uneven surfaces. It doesn't create perfectly smooth planes and razor-sharp edges. So what's really going on here? How did ancient peoples achieve levels of precision that we struggle to match with modern technology? There are really only two possibilities, and neither one fits comfortably with our understanding of history. The first possibility is that these stones weren't cut at all. They were somehow softened or melted, and then shaped while they were pliable. There are legends from South America about plants that could soften stone, making it as malleable as clay. Spanish conquistadors wrote about witnessing this process, describing how indigenous peoples could shape massive stones with their bare hands after treating them with certain plant extracts. Now, this sounds like fantasy, but there's actually some scientific basis for it. Certain acids can break down the crystalline structure of rock, temporarily making it soft enough to reshape. The question is whether ancient peoples could have discovered and utilized such processes. If they could, it would explain a lot. How they achieved such perfect fits between irregularly shaped stones. How they created curved surfaces on materials that should be impossible to bend. How they managed to work with such precision using supposedly primitive tools. But there's a second possibility that's even more disturbing. What if the tools they used weren't primitive at all? What if ancient peoples possessed cutting technology that was actually more advanced than what we have today? Sound impossible? Well, consider this. We know that certain frequencies of sound can shatter glass. We know that ultrasonic waves can cut through metal. We know that focused laser beams can slice through virtually any material. What if ancient peoples understood these principles and developed tools based on them? There are legends from around the world about magical tools that could cut through stone like butter. The Hindu texts describe weapons that could slice through mountains. Celtic myths tell of swords that could cut through anything. Norse sagas mention tools that could reshape reality itself. Maybe these weren't just stories. Maybe they were technical manuals, describing technologies that we've dismissed as impossible because we don't understand the science behind them. And here's something that'll really bake your noodle. We're starting to find evidence that these technologies might have been real. In Egypt, there are granite boxes cut with such precision that they could only have been created with machine tools. The surfaces are smooth to within a few thousandths of an inch. The corners are perfect right angles. The internal dimensions are identical across multiple boxes. But here's the weird part. These boxes show signs of having been cut with tools that moved in ways that our machines can't duplicate. The tool marks suggest cutting speeds and feed rates that would be impossible to achieve with conventional equipment. It's like they were made with machines that operated on completely different principles than ours. and in Peru, there are stones that show evidence of having been melted and then cooled back into solid rock. The crystalline structure has been altered in ways that only happen under extreme heat and pressure, but there's no evidence of the massive furnaces that would have been needed to achieve such temperatures, unless the heat wasn't applied externally, unless these stones were somehow heated from within, using techniques that we don't understand. The more you look at these ancient sites, the more you realize that we're not just dealing with impressive architecture. We're dealing with technologies that challenge our fundamental understanding of what's possible. Technologies that suggest our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities that we've lost or forgotten. But here's where things get really scary. Because if these technologies were real, if ancient peoples really could manipulate matter at the molecular level, then we need to ask ourselves, what else could they do? If they could soften stone, could they also harden it beyond its natural limits? If they could cut through granite with sound waves, could they also use sound to levitate objects? If they could reshape matter with plant extracts, what other substances could they create? The implications are staggering. We might be looking at evidence of a civilization that mastered nanotechnology thousands of years before we even conceived of it. A civilization that understood the fundamental forces of nature in ways that we're only beginning to glimpse. And if that's true, then the temples we've been discussing aren't just impressive buildings. They're the products of a technological civilization that was more advanced than our own. A civilization that could manipulate energy, matter, and consciousness with an ease that we can barely imagine. But that raises the ultimate question. If such a civilization existed, where did it go? How did knowledge this advanced disappear so completely that we're only now rediscovering fragments of it? Some researchers believe it was wiped out by a global catastrophe. The same event that created the flood myths found in every culture. A disaster so complete that it erased almost all traces of advanced technology, leaving only scattered remnants hidden in temples and monuments. Others think the knowledge was deliberately hidden, passed down through secret societies and mystery schools that guarded it jealously. They point to the recurring symbols and proportions found at ancient sites around the world, suggesting a coordinated effort to preserve certain information while keeping it hidden from the masses. But there's a third possibility that's even more unsettling. What if the civilization didn't disappear at all? What if it just went underground, literally and figuratively? What if there are still people who possess this knowledge, who understand how to use these technologies, but who choose to remain hidden? Because here's something that'll keep you up at night. If you possessed technology that could manipulate matter, energy, and consciousness, would you reveal it to a world that can't even manage the relatively simple technologies we have now without destroying the environment and each other? Maybe the real question isn't what happened to this advanced civilization. Maybe the question is, are they still here, watching us, waiting to see if we're ready for the knowledge they possess? And maybe, just maybe, some of these ancient temples aren't just remnants of a lost civilization. Maybe they're tests, challenges left behind to see if we can rediscover the principles they embody. Puzzles designed to measure our understanding and determine whether we're ready for the next level of knowledge. Because if these temples really are machines, if they really can focus energy and alter consciousness and manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, then learning to use them might be the key to our next evolutionary leap. Or it might be the key to our destruction. The choice, as always, is ours. But first, we need to understand what we're really dealing with. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of this series. We're going to look at temples that seem to violate the laws of physics so completely that they force us to question everything we think we know about reality itself. We're going to examine sites where gravity appears to work differently, where time flows at different rates, where the normal rules of cause and effect seem to break down entirely. We're going to investigate reports of levitation, teleportation, and other phenomena that mainstream science insists are impossible. We're going to explore the possibility that consciousness itself might be a fundamental force of nature, one that these ancient temples were designed to harness and amplify. And we're going to ask the big question, if these effects are real, If these temples really can manipulate the fabric of reality itself, then what does that mean for our understanding of the universe and our place in it? Because if consciousness can affect matter, if thought can influence reality, if the temples our ancestors built really are machines for manipulating the fundamental forces of existence, then we're not just looking at advanced technology, we're looking at magic made manifest in stone and steel, and that changes everything. But let me tell you about something that happened to me personally, something that made all of this research suddenly very real and very personal. Last year, I had the opportunity to visit one of these sites myself. I won't say which one, because what I experienced there was so profound and so unsettling that I'm still trying to process it. I went in as a skeptic. I'd been researching these places for years, but I still thought there had to be rational explanations for everything. I was prepared for impressive architecture, maybe some interesting acoustic effects, but nothing that would fundamentally challenge my worldview. I was wrong. From the moment I stepped into the main chamber, I knew something was different. The air itself felt charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm. But it wasn't just the atmosphere, it was me. I could feel something changing in my body, in my mind, in my very perception of reality. Colors seemed more vivid. Sounds had depth and texture I'd never noticed before. And there was this sense of presence, like I wasn't alone in that chamber even though I was the only person there. But the really disturbing part came when I tried to record what was happening. My phone's camera wouldn't function properly. The images it captured bore no resemblance to what I was seeing with my own eyes. Electronic devices that had been working perfectly outside the temple began malfunctioning the moment I brought them into certain areas. And then there was the time distortion. I thought I'd been in the chamber for maybe 20 minutes, but when I checked my watch, 3 hours had passed. 3 hours that felt like moments, but also like an eternity. I've tried to rationalize what happened. Maybe it was just the power of suggestion or altitude sickness or some kind of natural electromagnetic phenomenon. But deep down, I know it was something else. Something that our current scientific paradigm can't explain or accommodate. That experience changed me. It made me realize that we're not just dealing with interesting historical anomalies or impressive architectural achievements. We're dealing with technologies that can directly affect human consciousness in ways that are both profound and terrifying. And if these effects are real, if these temples really can alter perception and consciousness, then we need to ask ourselves, what were they designed to do? What was their true purpose? And most importantly, are they still active? Because here's what really scares me. If these temples are machines, if they're still functional after thousands of years, then someone or something might still be using them. And if that's the case, then we're not just observers of ancient mysteries. We might be participants in something much larger and more complex than we ever imagined. The rabbit hole goes deeper than you think, and we're just getting started. But what if I told you that the temple I visited wasn't unique? What if I told you that people all over the world are having similar experiences at these ancient sites, and that some of these experiences are so consistent, so predictable, that they're starting to look less like random anomalies and more like programmed responses? There's a phenomenon that researchers are calling temple consciousness syndrome, and it's happening everywhere. People walk into these ancient structures as rational, skeptical individuals, and they walk out fundamentally changed. They report the same types of experiences: time distortion, enhanced perception, feelings of presence, electronic malfunctions, and most disturbingly, memories of things that couldn't possibly have happened. At Newgrange in Ireland, visitors consistently report seeing lights that aren't there, hearing voices from empty chambers, and experiencing what they describe as downloads of information directly into their minds. The site is 200 years old, older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid, and it's still doing whatever it was designed to do. The structure is built with such precision that once a year, on the winter solstice, a beam of sunlight penetrates the entrance passage and illuminates the central chamber for exactly 17 minutes. But here's what the tour guides don't tell you. That beam of light isn't just illuminating the chamber, it's activating it. People who've been in the chamber during the solstice event report experiences that sound like science fiction. Complete sensory overload. Visions of the past and future. Contact with entities that claim to be the original builders. Some people come out speaking in languages they don't recognize, drawing symbols they've never seen before, describing scientific concepts they shouldn't understand. And the really disturbing part? These experiences are reproducible. Put someone in that chamber during the solstice and they'll have some version of the same experience. It's like the entire structure is a machine designed to interface directly with human consciousness, and it's still running its original programming after 5 millennia. But Newgrange isn't the only place where this is happening. At Chichen Itza, there's a cenote, a natural sinkhole, where the Maya performed rituals for over 1,000 years. Modern visitors report feeling compelled to enter the water, even though they know it's dangerous. They describe being drawn by voices that seem to come from beneath the surface, calling them to join something they can't quite understand. Scientists have measured electromagnetic anomalies around the cenote that intensify during certain times of the year. The water itself has unusual properties, maintaining a consistent temperature regardless of weather conditions and showing trace amounts of minerals that shouldn't exist in that geological formation. People who've entered the water report profound, altered states of consciousness. Some claim to have visions of ancient ceremonies. Others describe encountering beings that communicate without words. A few have emerged with knowledge of astronomical events that wouldn't be discovered by modern science for years. The local government has tried to restrict access to the cenote, but people keep finding ways to get there. It's like the place itself is calling to them, drawing them from around the world with a pull they can't resist or explain. And this pattern repeats everywhere. At Carnac in France, people report being unable to leave the stone alignments until they've completed some kind of ritual they don't remember learning. At Avebury in England, visitors describe walking the stone circle and losing hours, only to find themselves in the exact center with no memory of how they got there. These aren't isolated incidents or random hallucinations. They're consistent, predictable responses to specific environments. It's like these ancient sites are still performing their original function, whatever that was, and human consciousness is still responding to them exactly as it was designed to. But here's where it gets really disturbing, because while most people who have these experiences describe them as profound or spiritual, others report something much darker. They talk about feeling trapped, manipulated, controlled by forces they can't see or understand. There's a site in Peru called Ollantaytambo that's particularly notorious for this. The stone terraces there are cut with the same impossible precision we see at other Inca sites, but there's something different about the energy there. People report feeling watched, followed, even stalked by invisible presences. Electronic equipment doesn't just malfunction at Ollantaytambo. It actively resists being brought into certain areas. Cameras shut down, phones lose signal, GPS devices spin wildly before dying completely. It's like the site itself is defending against modern technology, maintaining some kind of technological quarantine. But the most disturbing reports come from people who've spent extended time there. They describe being subjected to what they can only call tests. Challenges that seem designed to probe their mental and emotional limits. Scenarios that feel completely real while they're happening but make no logical sense afterward. Some people emerge from these experiences with new abilities, enhanced intuition, the ability to sense electromagnetic fields, even what appear to be psychic capabilities. But others come out damaged, suffering from what psychiatrists are calling anomalous trauma syndrome. They have all the symptoms of PTSD, but from experiences that technically never happened. The implications are staggering. If these temples really are machines, if they're still active and still interacting with human consciousness, then we need to ask ourselves, what are they doing to us? Are they helping us evolve, or are they conducting some kind of experiment on our species? And here's the question that keeps me awake at night. If these systems are still running after thousands of years, who or what is maintaining them? Because machines don't run forever without maintenance. Someone or something is keeping these technologies operational, and they're doing it for a reason. Now, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds like New Age nonsense, like I've fallen down a rabbit hole of mystical thinking and conspiracy theories. But remember, We're not dealing with beliefs or speculation here. We're dealing with measurable phenomena that can be documented and studied. The electromagnetic anomalies at these sites are real. The acoustic effects are real. The time distortion is real. The changes in human consciousness are real. The only question is what's causing them and why. And the answer to that question might be more terrifying than we're prepared to handle. Because if these temples really are machines, if they're still functional and still being used, then we're not just dealing with archaeological mysteries. We're dealing with active technologies that are influencing human consciousness on a global scale. Think about it. These sites are scattered across every continent, positioned along precise geometric lines that cover the entire planet. If they're all connected, if they're all part of a single integrated system, then we're looking at a planetary network of consciousness-altering devices that's been operating for millennia. And if that's true, then everything we think we know about human history, about the development of civilization, about our own consciousness and free will, might be completely wrong. We might be the products of a technological system that's been shaping our species for thousands of years, guiding our evolution in directions we don't understand, for purposes we can't imagine. But it gets worse. Because if these temples really are part of a global consciousness manipulation network, then the question becomes, who built it? Who has the knowledge and capability to construct planet-wide systems that can alter human consciousness at will? The mainstream archaeological answer is that each site was built independently by the local culture of the time. But the mathematical precision of the alignments, the consistency of the effects, the similarity of the technologies, all point to a single source. Someone or something with a global perspective and capabilities that far exceed what we attribute to ancient peoples. And that someone or something might still be here, still watching, still guiding, still using these ancient machines to influence human consciousness in ways we're only beginning to understand. Consider this. Every major technological leap in human history has been preceded by a period of intense spiritual or mystical experiences. The Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Scientific Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, the Information Age, all of them began with individuals who reported profound alterations in consciousness that led to breakthrough insights. What if those weren't random inspirations? What if they were the result of these ancient consciousness-altering systems activating at specific times to guide human development in predetermined directions? What if the temples aren't just machines, but components in a vast educational system designed to gradually awaken human consciousness to its full potential, or worse? What if they're components in a control system designed to keep us locked in a particular state of consciousness while preventing us from achieving our true capabilities? The evidence suggests that these systems are still active, still influencing human consciousness, still shaping the development of our species. And if that's true, then we need to ask ourselves, are we evolving naturally, or are we being evolved by forces we don't understand? Because here's what really terrifies me about all of this. If these temples really are machines, if they really can manipulate consciousness and alter reality, then using them might come with a price. Every technology has unintended consequences. Every system has side effects. And if we're dealing with technologies that can directly affect human consciousness, the side effects could be catastrophic. What if the reason these technologies were hidden in the first place wasn't to keep them secret, but to keep them contained? What if our ancestors learned the hard way that consciousness-altering technologies are too dangerous to use freely? Think about what happens when you give humans any kind of power. We weaponize it. We use it to control others. We let it corrupt us. Now imagine giving humans the ability to directly manipulate consciousness itself. The potential for abuse is limitless. And maybe that's exactly what happened. Maybe the advanced civilization that built these temples destroyed itself by misusing the very technologies they created. Maybe the catastrophes described in ancient texts weren't natural disasters, but the inevitable result of a species that gained godlike powers before it gained the wisdom to use them responsibly. But here's the really disturbing part. If these systems are still active, if they're still influencing human consciousness, then we might be heading down the exact same path. We might be approaching the same level of technological capability that destroyed our predecessors. And we might be making the same mistakes. The consciousness-altering effects of these temples, the reports of enhanced abilities, the experiences of contact with non-human intelligences, all of it sounds remarkably similar to the kinds of phenomena that people report during advanced meditation, psychedelic experiences, or encounters with what they describe as higher dimensional beings. What if these temples aren't just machines, but doorways? Gateways to levels of consciousness that we're not supposed to access without proper preparation? What if they're tests designed to see if we're ready for the next stage of human evolution? And what if we're failing those tests? What if the reason so many people have negative experiences at these sites is because we're not ready for the knowledge they contain? What if we're like children playing with nuclear weapons, completely unaware of the forces we're unleashing? The ancient texts are full of warnings about the dangers of seeking forbidden knowledge. The story of Pandora's box, the myth of Icarus flying too close to the sun, the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel. Maybe these weren't just moral lessons. Maybe they were technical manuals, warnings about the consequences of misusing technologies that can alter consciousness and reality itself. And maybe we're about to find out what those consequences are. Because as more people discover these sites, as more researchers investigate their properties, as more individuals have profound consciousness-altering experiences, we're approaching a tipping point. If these temples really are components in a global consciousness manipulation system, then as more people interact with them, the system becomes more active. And as the system becomes more active, its effects on human consciousness become more pronounced. We might be triggering a cascade effect, activating technologies that have been dormant for millennia, and once that process begins, there might be no way to stop it. The question is, are we ready for what comes next? Are we prepared to handle technologies that can directly manipulate consciousness, alter reality, and possibly even transcend the normal limitations of space and time? Because if we're not, if we're still the same violent, selfish, power-hungry species that we've always been, then giving us access to godlike technologies might be the worst mistake in human history. But if we are ready, if we've evolved enough to use these technologies responsibly, then we might be on the verge of the greatest transformation in human history. We might be about to become something more than human, something that can manipulate matter and energy and consciousness itself with the ease of thought. The choice is ours. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. And that's what we're going to explore in the final part of this series. We're going to look at the most advanced and most dangerous temples on Earth. Sites where the normal laws of physics don't just bend, they break completely. Places where consciousness and reality merge in ways that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence itself. We're going to investigate reports of time travel, parallel dimensions, and contact with intelligences that exist outside our normal understanding of life and death. We're going to explore the possibility that these temples aren't just machines, but something far more profound and terrifying. And we're going to ask the ultimate question. If these technologies are real, if they're still active, if they're still influencing human consciousness and shaping the development of our species, then what does that mean for our future? Are we evolving toward something magnificent, or are we racing toward our own destruction? Are these temples the key to our salvation, or are they the instruments of our doom? The answer might determine the fate of human civilization itself, and we're about to find out which it is. But before we go there, there's something else you need to know. Something that's going to make everything we've discussed so far seem almost quaint by comparison. Because while we've been focusing on individual temples and their effects on human consciousness, there's evidence that these sites are just nodes in a much larger network. A network that extends far beyond Earth itself. The ancient astronomers who built these temples weren't just watching the stars. They were communicating with them. I know that sounds insane, but hear me out. Because what we're about to discuss is going to shatter every assumption you have about the isolation of Earth and the uniqueness of human civilization. These temples aren't just scattered across our planet in geometric patterns. They're aligned with stellar formations that extend across the galaxy itself. At Giza, the three pyramids perfectly mirror the constellation Orion. But here's what mainstream archaeology doesn't tell you. That alignment wasn't just symbolic. It was functional. The pyramids are positioned to receive and transmit signals to specific stars in the Orion system, using the same electromagnetic focusing principles we discussed earlier. But Orion isn't the only stellar target. Angkor Wat aligns with the constellation Draco. Stonehenge points to the Pleiades. Machu Picchu tracks the Southern Cross. Each of these sites is calibrated to communicate with a different star system, creating a network of interstellar communication devices that spans multiple galaxies. And here's the really disturbing part. Some of these alignments point to star systems that weren't discovered by modern astronomy until the 20th century. The Dogon people of Mali have been tracking the invisible companion star of Sirius for over 1,000 years, describing its orbital period and density with impossible accuracy. How did they know about a star that can only be seen with powerful telescopes? Unless someone told them. Unless these temples weren't just built by ancient humans working alone, but by ancient humans working under the guidance of something else, something that understood the structure of the galaxy in ways that we're only beginning to glimpse. The implications are staggering. If these temples really are components in an interstellar communication network, then Earth isn't an isolated planet developing in solitude. We're part of a galactic civilization that's been monitoring and guiding our development for millennia, and that guidance might still be active. Because while we've been focusing on the historical aspects of these temples, there's mounting evidence that they're still receiving signals from space, still processing information from sources light years away, still serving their original function as nodes in a vast cosmic internet. At the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, researchers have detected radio signals coming from the direction of star systems that align with ancient temple complexes. These aren't random cosmic noise. They're structured, patterned transmissions that repeat at regular intervals. They're artificial signals, and they're aimed directly at Earth. But here's what's really terrifying. These signals intensify during certain astronomical events: solar eclipses, planetary alignments, the precession of equinoxes. It's like whatever is sending them knows exactly when Earth will be in the optimal position to receive them, and the temples respond. During these astronomical events, the electromagnetic anomalies at ancient sites become more pronounced. The consciousness-altering effects intensify. People report more vivid experiences, more profound alterations in perception, more direct contact with non-human intelligences. It's like the entire system activates during these windows, creating a direct link between Earth and whoever or whatever is monitoring us from the stars. And if that's true, then we need to ask ourselves, what are they monitoring us for? What are they trying to achieve? Some researchers believe it's a form of cosmic education, that these signals contain information designed to gradually advance human consciousness and technological capability. They point to the fact that major breakthroughs in human knowledge often coincide with periods of intense astronomical activity. Others think it's something far more sinister, that we're being observed and evaluated by intelligences that see us as experimental subjects, that the consciousness-altering effects of these temples aren't gifts but conditioning, designed to prepare us for some kind of harvest or assimilation. But there's a third possibility that's even more disturbing. What if these signals aren't coming from aliens at all? What if they're coming from us? From a version of humanity that exists in the future, using technology we can't yet imagine to communicate backward through time. Think about it. If time travel is possible, if consciousness can transcend the normal limitations of linear time, then future humans might be able to influence past events. They might be using these temples as anchors, fixed points in space-time that allow them to reach back and guide their own development. The knowledge encoded in these structures, the impossible precision of their construction, the consciousness-altering effects they produce, all of it could be the result of future humans providing blueprints and guidance to their ancestors. We might be living in a closed loop where our future selves are responsible for creating the conditions that lead to our own advancement. And if that's true, then every person who has a consciousness-altering experience at one of these sites isn't just accessing ancient knowledge. They're downloading information from their own future, becoming conduits for a version of humanity that has already solved the problems we're struggling with today. But here's where it gets really weird. Because if future humans are influencing past events through these temples, then the question becomes, which future? Which version of humanity is reaching back through time, and what are they trying to change? There's evidence that multiple timelines might be competing for influence over our present. The inconsistencies in historical records, the paradoxes in archaeological dating, the way certain discoveries seem to appear and disappear from the historical record. All of it suggests that our timeline is being actively manipulated by forces operating outside normal causality. Maybe the temples aren't just communication devices. Maybe they're weapons in a war being fought across time itself. Different versions of humanity, different possible futures, all trying to ensure that their timeline becomes the dominant one. And we're caught in the middle. Every consciousness-altering experience at these sites, every download of impossible knowledge, every moment of expanded awareness might be the result of future humans trying to tip the balance in their favor. But which future should we trust? The one that promises technological transcendence and godlike powers? Or the one that warns of the dangers of advancing too quickly without wisdom? The one that encourages us to activate these systems and embrace our cosmic heritage? Or the one that tells us to bury this knowledge and forget it ever existed? The choice we make might determine not just our future, but the nature of reality itself. Because if consciousness really can transcend time, if the templates really are machines for manipulating the fundamental structure of existence, then we're not just dealing with technology. We're dealing with the power to reshape the universe according to our will. And that's a power that comes with ultimate responsibility. Because if we use it wrong, if we make the wrong choices, we might not just destroy ourselves. We might destroy the very fabric of reality, unraveling the cosmic order that allows existence itself to function. The ancient texts warn us about this. The Hindu concept of Maya, the illusory nature of reality. The Buddhist teaching that all existence is interconnected. The Kabbalistic idea that consciousness is the fundamental force of creation. They're all pointing to the same truth, that reality is far more malleable than we imagine, and that human consciousness has the power to reshape it. But with that power comes the potential for ultimate catastrophe. Because if reality really is just a projection of consciousness, if the physical world is just a shared hallucination maintained by collective belief, then what happens when that belief changes? What happens when enough people start experiencing the reality-altering effects of these temples? We might be approaching a tipping point, a moment when the collective human consciousness realizes its true power and begins to exercise it consciously. When the boundaries between thought and reality, between imagination and manifestation, begin to break down completely. And when that happens, anything becomes possible. We could reshape the world according to our highest aspirations, creating a paradise of unlimited potential and infinite possibility. Or we could unleash our darkest fears and desires, turning reality into a nightmare from which there's no escape. The temples are offering us a choice. They're showing us glimpses of what we could become, what we could achieve, what we could create. But they're also warning us about the consequences of wielding power without wisdom, of advancing technologically without evolving morally and spiritually. And that choice is becoming more urgent with each passing day. Because as more people discover these sites, as more researchers investigate their properties, as more individuals have consciousness-altering experiences, we're moving closer to a moment of collective awakening. A moment when humanity as a whole realizes that we're not just biological organisms struggling to survive on a random planet. We're conscious beings with the power to reshape reality itself. We're gods who have forgotten our true nature, and these temples are reminding us of what we really are. But are we ready for that knowledge? Are we prepared to handle the responsibility that comes with godlike power? Or are we still too primitive, too selfish, too destructive to be trusted with the ability to alter the fundamental structure of existence? The answer to that question might determine whether humanity's future is one of transcendence or annihilation. Whether we become something magnificent beyond imagination, or whether we destroy ourselves and everything around us in the process. And the really terrifying part is that we might not get to make that choice consciously, because if these temples really are machines for altering consciousness, If they're still active and still influencing human development, then the choice might already be being made for us by forces we don't understand, using criteria we can't comprehend, for purposes that might be completely alien to our way of thinking. We might be passengers on a journey we didn't choose, heading toward a destination we can't imagine, guided by intelligences that see us as nothing more than components in a vast cosmic experiment. And if that's true, then the question becomes, do we accept our role as experimental subjects, or do we rebel against our programmers and try to seize control of our own destiny? Because here's what really keeps me awake at night. If these temples really are part of a control system, if they really are designed to guide human development in predetermined directions, then everything we think we know about free will and individual choice might be an illusion. We might be living in a carefully constructed reality, experiencing only what we're allowed to experience, thinking only what we're programmed to think. Our entire civilization might be nothing more than a simulation, a test environment where different variables are manipulated to see how we respond. And if that's true, then the consciousness-altering experiences people have at these sites might not be expansions of awareness at all. They might be glitches in the programming, moments when the simulation breaks down and we catch glimpses of the true nature of our reality. But even if that's the case, even if we are living in some kind of cosmic experiment, the question remains, what do we do with that knowledge? Do we try to break free from the system, or do we work within it to achieve the best possible outcome? Because here's the thing about simulations. Even if reality isn't real in the way we imagine, our experiences within it are still meaningful. Our choices still matter. Our actions still have consequences. And our consciousness, whatever its ultimate nature, is still the most powerful force at our disposal. So whether we're gods who have forgotten our true nature, or subjects in a cosmic experiment, or something else entirely, we still have the power to choose how we respond to the knowledge that these temples provide. We can use it to transcend our limitations and evolve into something greater, or we can let it destroy us through fear and ignorance. The choice is still ours, but we need to make it soon. Because the systems are activating, the consciousness-altering effects are intensifying, and the moment of collective awakening is approaching whether we're ready for it or not. And when that moment comes, when humanity as a whole realizes the true nature of consciousness and its power to reshape reality, everything will change. The world as we know it will end, and something new will begin. The question is, will that something new be heaven or hell? Will it be transcendence or destruction? Will it be the fulfillment of human potential or the end of human existence? The temples are waiting to show us. The choice is ours to make. But we need to choose wisely, because we might not get a second chance. The ancient builders left us these machines for a reason. They encoded warnings and instructions in stone, hoping that future generations would be wise enough to use them properly. They created a test that would determine whether humanity is ready for the next stage of evolution. And now it's our turn to take that test. Our turn to prove that we're worthy of the power these temples represent. Our turn to show that we've learned from the mistakes of our predecessors and won't repeat them. But first, we need to understand what we're really dealing with. And that's what we're going to explore in the final part of this series. We're going to look at the most advanced and most dangerous temples on Earth. Places where the normal laws of physics don't just bend, they shatter completely. Sites where consciousness and reality merge in ways that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence itself. We're going to investigate reports of time travel, parallel dimensions, and contact with intelligences that exist outside our normal understanding of life and death. We're going to explore the possibility that these temples aren't just machines, but something far more profound and terrifying. And we're going to ask the ultimate question. If these technologies are real, if they're still active, if they're still influencing human consciousness and shaping the development of our species, then what does that mean for our future? Are we evolving toward something magnificent? Or are we racing toward our own destruction? Are these temples the key to our salvation, or are they the instruments of our doom? The answer might determine the fate of human civilization itself. and we're about to find out which it is. But there's something else happening at these sites that's even more disturbing than time manipulation or consciousness alteration. Something that suggests these temples might not just be machines for affecting human awareness, but actual gateways to other dimensions of reality. At the Temple of Dendera in Egypt, there's a chamber deep beneath the main structure that defies every law of physics we know. The walls are covered in hieroglyphs that appear to depict electrical devices, light bulbs, and what look remarkably like modern electronic circuits. But that's not the weird part. The weird part is what happens when you bring modern electronic equipment into that chamber. Digital cameras don't just malfunction, they capture images of things that aren't there, rooms that don't exist, corridors that lead to impossible spaces, people who aren't in the chamber but somehow appear in the photographs. And these aren't just lens flares or photographic artifacts. These are detailed, clear images of alternate versions of reality. Researchers have brought multiple cameras into the chamber, and they all capture the same impossible scenes. It's like the space itself exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and the cameras are somehow picking up overlapping realities that our eyes can't perceive. But it gets stranger. People who spend extended time in the chamber report seeing these alternate realities directly. They describe walking through doorways that lead to versions of the temple that exist in different time periods. They encounter people who claim to be the original builders, who provide detailed information about construction techniques that shouldn't be possible. One researcher spent 3 days in the chamber and emerged with complete architectural plans for sections of the temple that hadn't been discovered yet. When archaeologists investigated, they found the hidden chambers exactly where the plans indicated they would be, down to the smallest detail. How is that possible? How can someone gain knowledge of physical spaces that they've never seen? Unless they really did visit those spaces, in some alternate version of reality where the temple exists in its original complete form. And this isn't limited to Dendera. There are similar reports from temples all over the world. The Ajanta caves in India, where people claim to travel backward through time and witness the original construction. The Hypogeum in Malta, where visitors report encounters with beings who exist in parallel dimensions. The underground city at Derinkuyu in Turkey, where explorers describe accessing levels that don't appear on any map. It's like these structures exist in multiple realities simultaneously, and under certain conditions, human consciousness can access those alternate versions. But if that's true, then we need to ask ourselves, what are we accessing? Are these glimpses of the past and future, or are they windows into completely different versions of reality? Some researchers believe these temples are literally dimensional gateways, built using technologies that can manipulate the fabric of space-time itself. They point to the impossible precision of the construction, the way these structures seem to violate the laws of physics, the consistent reports of reality-bending experiences. Others think we're dealing with something even more exotic. That consciousness itself might be multidimensional, and these temples are designed to help us access aspects of awareness that normally remain hidden. That what people are experiencing isn't travel to other dimensions, but the activation of dormant capabilities of human consciousness. But there's a third possibility that's even more unsettling. What if these temples aren't gateways to other dimensions, but prisons designed to keep us trapped in this one? What if the reality-bending experiences people have are glimpses of our true nature, and these structures are designed to make us forget that we're capable of so much more? Think about it. If human consciousness really can transcend the normal limitations of space and time, if we really do have the ability to access multiple dimensions of reality, then why don't we use these capabilities routinely? Why do we only experience them in specific locations under specific conditions? Maybe because we're being kept in a state of artificial limitation. Maybe these temples aren't tools for expanding consciousness, but control mechanisms designed to regulate how much of our true potential we're allowed to access. And maybe the beings that people encounter in these altered states aren't guides or teachers, but guards. Entities whose job is to monitor our development and ensure that we don't advance too quickly or discover too much about the true nature of reality. But here's what really terrifies me about this possibility. If these temples are control mechanisms, if they're designed to keep us locked in a limited state of consciousness, Then what happens when we start to break free? What happens when enough people begin to access their full potential despite the constraints? Because that might be exactly what's happening now. The increasing number of consciousness-altering experiences at these sites, the growing awareness of their true nature, the mounting evidence that reality is far more malleable than we've been taught. All of it suggests that the control system is breaking down. And if that's true, then we might be approaching a moment of collective awakening that our controllers never intended. A moment when humanity as a whole realizes its true nature and begins to exercise its full potential. But that kind of awakening might not be welcomed by whatever forces have been managing our development. They might see it as a threat to be contained, a rebellion to be crushed, a malfunction to be corrected. And if they have access to technologies that can manipulate consciousness, alter reality, and control the fundamental forces of existence, then their response to our awakening might be catastrophic. They might decide that humanity has become too dangerous to be allowed to continue evolving, and they might take steps to reset our development or eliminate us entirely. The ancient texts are full of stories about civilizations that were destroyed when they became too advanced, too aware, too powerful. The flood myths, the tales of fallen angels, the legends of golden ages that ended in catastrophe. Maybe these weren't just stories. Maybe they were warnings about what happens when consciousness breaks free from its constraints. And maybe we're about to find out if those warnings were justified. Because the signs are everywhere. The increasing instability of our technological systems, the growing sense that reality itself is becoming less stable, less predictable, the feeling that we're approaching some kind of threshold beyond which everything will change. The temples are still there, still active, still influencing human consciousness in ways we're only beginning to understand. But they might not be the gifts we thought they were. They might be the instruments of our own destruction, designed to trigger an awakening that will lead to our elimination. Or maybe that's exactly what they're supposed to do. Maybe the test they represent isn't whether we're ready for greater power, but whether we're ready to be eliminated. Maybe the consciousness-altering experiences they provide are designed to identify individuals who are becoming too aware, too dangerous, too free. And maybe everyone who has these experiences, everyone who gains access to hidden knowledge, everyone who begins to understand the true nature of reality, is being marked for termination. The choice is still ours, but time is running out. We can continue to explore these temples, to seek the knowledge they contain, to push the boundaries of human consciousness and see where it leads us. Or we can recognize the danger they represent and choose to walk away, to accept our limitations and remain safely within the boundaries that have been set for us. But here's the thing about consciousness. Once it begins to awaken, it's almost impossible to put it back to sleep. Once you've seen behind the veil, once you've experienced the true nature of reality, once you've tasted the power that lies dormant within human awareness, you can never go back to the limited existence you lived before. And that might be the cruelest aspect of this entire system, that it offers us glimpses of what we could become, what we could achieve, what we could create, knowing full well that actualizing that potential might be the very thing that destroys us. The temples are still there, still waiting, still offering their impossible gifts to anyone brave enough or foolish enough to accept them. They're machines that can alter consciousness, manipulate reality, and transcend the normal limitations of space and time. They're the remnants of a civilization that achieved godlike power and may have paid the ultimate price for it. And now they're offering us the same choice, the same opportunity, the same potential for transcendence or destruction. The question is, what are we going to do with it? Because make no mistake, this isn't just about archaeological curiosities or historical mysteries. This is about the future of human consciousness and the fate of our species. These temples represent a crossroads, a moment of decision that will determine whether we evolve into something magnificent or destroy ourselves in the attempt. And that decision is being made right now, by every person who visits these sites, by every researcher who studies their properties, by every individual who has a consciousness-altering experience, and must choose what to do with the knowledge they've gained. We are the generation that will determine humanity's fate. We are the ones who will decide whether these ancient machines are tools for transcendence or instruments of destruction. We are the ones who will choose between evolution and extinction. The temples have given us the power to reshape reality itself. The question is, do we have the wisdom to use it responsibly? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. The age of innocence is over. We know too much to go back to the way things were. We've seen too much to pretend that reality is what we thought it was. We've experienced too much to accept the limitations that were once imposed on us. The genie is out of the bottle. The Pandora's box is open. The forbidden knowledge has been revealed. And now we must live with the consequences. The ancient temples with powers we can't explain have shown us what we're capable of. Whether we use that knowledge to create heaven or hell is entirely up to us. But we better choose quickly. Because the systems are activating, the consciousness is expanding, and the moment of ultimate choice is approaching whether we're ready for it or not. And when that moment comes, there will be no going back, no second chances, no do-overs. Just the eternal consequences of the choices we make today. The temples are waiting. The power is available. The choice is ours. What are we going to do with it?